It looks like the FDA is definitely for the people, or more precisely, for a very tiny group of people who can significantly impact the sales of large food, chemical, and drug corporations. We're in big trouble, folks, but there is hope for all of you who want a zero-calorie sweetener in your food while reducing your sugar intake. There is stevia. Stevia is an extract from a plant originally found in Paraguay. It has essentially 0 calories. It is over 100 times sweeter than sugar, and it is now being grown in most of South America, China, Japan, and even the United States, where it is sold only as a dietary supplement. It cannot be sold as a sweetener or even referred to as sweet, because since the 1980s, the FDA has labeled stevia an unsafe food additive, despite it being used by hundreds of millions of people as a natural sweetener for centuries in other countries with no known ill effects. But it should be good to know that there are parts of the federal government that have more integrity than some of the workers in the FDA. Take fluoridation, for example. It is considered by few to be an aid to our health, and yet most people in the United States are exposed to it daily and on purpose. The American Dental Association supports fluoridation of our water supplies, even though there are hundreds of scientific studies showing bad side effects to laboratory animals and almost none supporting any health benefits. If you don't think fluoride is a health hazard, then look at the back of your tube of toothpaste. If you use either Colgate or Crest, chances are you're getting more poisonous fluorides than you realize. Here's the warning on the back of a tube of Crest. Quote, "Warning. Keep out of the reach of children under 6 years of age. If more than used for brushing is accidentally swallowed, get medical help or contact the Poison Control Center right away." End quote. And the amount they're talking about is a pea-sized amount of toothpaste, which essentially gives you the same amount of fluoride that it is in 1 8-ounce glass of fluoridated water. If you still don't think fluoridation is harmful, what do you think about the Swiss being against it? The Swiss are neutral. They're never against anything. Recently, they became one of the last nations on the earth to join the United Nations. However, on April 9th, 2003, Switzerland stopped fluoridating their water after 41 years. Some of their findings and reasonings are: 1. The preventive effect of fluoridation of drinking water could not be proved by any study. When specialists do not succeed in producing definite proof in 40 years, the practice has to be abandoned. 2. In spite of the fluoridation of drinking water, dental caries have been on the increase in children. 3. The dangers of fluorosis is played down. Indeed, there is no discussion about fluorosis of the bones. The fluoridation of drinking water is particularly problematic in the case of young children and babies. And 4. Less than 1% of the fluoride in drinking water is actually used for prevention of caries. More than 99% of the fluoridated water is used for washing, cleaning, industrial protection, etc., and thus only pollutes the environment, a very undesirable imbalance. So there you have it. The Swiss are not neutral about something. Finally, the National Federation of Federal Employees, NFEE, which include many workers of the Environmental Protection Agency, stated on July 2nd, 1997, quote, "Our members' review of the body of evidence over the last 11 years, including animal and human epidemiology studies, indicate a causal link between fluoride fluoridation and cancer, genetic damage, neurological impairment, and bone pathology." End quote. According to NFEE, quote, "The health and welfare of the public is not served by the addition of this substance, fluoride, to the public water supply, for which there is virtually no evidence of significant benefits and substantial evidence of adverse effects." End quote. Once again, we have many honest and hard-working government workers whose results are not accepted by upper-level administrators and policymakers. But the question to ask is, who is running America, corporations or the federal government? These two institutions are very different creatures. Corporations are dictatorships, and our federal government is supposed to be a democratic republic that serves the people. To corporations, people are customers, which is a euphemism for suckers, rubes, marks, dupes, patsies, and fools who will shortly give up their money, and ultimately people not to be respected. To government, people are citizens, constituents, taxpayers, homeowners, members of families, humans, and ultimately people to be respected. A great description of the 20th century was made by an Australian psychologist who turned political scientist. His name was Alex Carey, and he said, quote, "The 20th century can be characterized by three trends: the growth of democracy, the growth of corporate power, and the growth of corporate propaganda as a means to protect corporate power from democracy." End quote. This is just what we saw at the beginning of this program with the Jane Acre incident. This question gets even grayer when we consider the words of President Harry S. Truman, who in 1973 regretfully stated, quote, "I think it was a mistake, and if I'd known what was going to happen, I never would have done it. But it got out of hand. Now, as nearly as I can make out, those fellows in the CIA don't just report on wars and the like, they go out and make their own. And there's nobody to keep track of what they're up to. They spend billions of dollars on stirring up trouble so they'll have something to report on. It's become a government all of its own and all secret. They don't have to account to anybody." More recently, Senator Daniel Inouye of Hawaii stated in 1987, quote, "There exists a shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself." End quote. You can even see him say this on YouTube. But we were warned back in 1961 by President Eisenhower's last speech to the nation. Quote, "In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together." End quote. We have to ask ourselves, are corporations and other non-American entities really controlling the government? There is a revolving door between many of our military and governmental officials who move between government positions and corporate positions and back. Warfare makes a lot of money for a tiny fraction of Americans. The children of our wealthy and high government officials seldom ever take part in the fighting. And the fighting is always about defending us, even though our forces are always invading other countries. And these are countries that often have economic activities that are beneficial for their people, but not necessarily for the corporations of America. We have many very good solutions to this that would not only benefit ourselves, but the people of the world and the entire biosphere. These are solutions that do not increase profits for American-controlled transnational corporations, but they are solutions for the vast majority of the people. We aren't on this planet to make money. We are here to live satisfying and useful lives, but never at the expense of others. We all want to succeed, but not at making a lot of money, and not at making life worse for others. We all want to succeed by having a rich and meaningful life. To quote Emerson, quote, "To laugh often and love much, to win the respect of intelligent persons and the affection of children, to earn the approbation of honest critics and to endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to give of oneself, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to have played and laughed with enthusiasm and sung with exultation, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded." End quote. If we had spent the $1 trillion we just wasted on the Iraq War and used it to make sustainable electric power stations and electric cars, we could have cut our dependency on oil by 50% over the past 7 years. We have to ask why our government is not using our tax dollars in a more beneficial way for the majority of Americans. Why are they hell-bent on war? They say they are making us safer, but in reality they are making us less safe because their policies are making more people angrier, both foreign and domestic. This is a terrible failure of government. The whole purpose of a democratic republic is for our political servants to serve the people, but somehow this has been lost over the past few decades. The main way for you to make things better, that is, if you want to be an enlightened human being, is to inform yourselves fully. If you don't know what is happening, then you are prone to follow the massive advice of the propaganda from the mainstream media and our government.